The rain pattered against the glass windows of the 7-Eleven, leaving long, streaky trails on the fogged-up panes. I, Min, a 25-year-old college student, sat behind the cashier counter, my old laptop open in front of me, its blue glow casting faint shadows across my tired face. It was past 2 in the morning, and the chill of the winter night seeped through the glass doors, making me shiver slightly. I was pursuing an online degree, and this night shift job at 7-Eleven was the perfect gig, quiet enough to study while earning a paycheck. Most nights were dead, with only the occasional customer stumbling in for a late-night snack or a pack of cigarettes. I'd slide my laptop aside, ring them up, and return to my coursework the moment they left. Tonight, though, the rain and cold ensured the store was emptier than usual, and I was grateful for it. The store was a small, fluorescent-lit haven in the middle of a sleepy suburban strip mall. Shelves were stocked with chips, candy bars, and energy drinks, their colorful packaging glowing under the harsh lights. A faint hum from the refrigeration units filled the air, blending with the soft static of the radio, playing some forgotten pop song. I adjusted my hoodie, pulling the sleeves over my hands to ward off the chill, and focused on my laptop. I was halfway through a research paper on urban sociology, my fingers tapping rhythmically on the keys. The words blurred together as my eyes grew heavy, but I pushed through. Deadlines didn't care about my sleep schedule. Outside the parking lot was a slick, black expanse, illuminated only by the flickering street lights and the neon glow of the 7-Eleven sign. The rain had driven everyone indoors, and I hadn't seen a customer in nearly 2 hours. It was the kind of night where the world felt like it had paused, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the steady drip of water outside. I liked it this way, quiet, predictable, safe. My only company was the occasional creak of the building settling, or the distant rumble of a car passing on the highway nearby. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 2:17 a.m. My shift wouldn't end until 6 a.m., but I was already counting the hours. I stretched my back aching from hours of hunching over the counter and took a sip of the lukewarm coffee I'd poured earlier. The bitter taste jolted me awake, and I turned back to my paper, determined to make progress. That's when I heard it, the faint jingle of the bell above the front door. My head snapped up, startled. I hadn't heard a car pull into the lot, and the sudden sound cut through the silence like a knife. I quickly pushed my laptop to the side, sliding it behind a stack of receipts, and straightened up plastering on the polite smile I reserved for customers. The door swung open, letting in a gust of cold, damp air, and a man stepped inside. He was tall, maybe in his early 30s, with a scruffy beard and short, dark hair plastered to his forehead from the rain. His jacket was a faded green, zipped up to his chin, and his jeans were worn at the knees. He didn't look at me as he entered, his eyes scanning the aisles with a strange intensity. I watched him, my smile faltering slightly. There was something off about him. Maybe it was the way he moved slow and deliberate, or the way his hands stayed buried in his pockets. I couldn't put my finger on it, but my gut twisted with unease. "Hey, welcome to 7-Eleven," I said, my voice a little too loud in the quiet store. He didn't respond, just kept walking down the first aisle, his boots leaving faint, wet prints on the linoleum floor. I leaned forward, trying to keep him in my line of sight. He wasn't grabbing anything, just looking. His head tilted slightly as he studied the shelves, like he was searching for something specific, but wasn't sure what. I forced myself to relax. People came in all the time and browsed without buying anything. Maybe he was just killing time, waiting out the rain. Still, I kept one eye on him as I pretended to organize the counter-shuffling pens and receipts. After a minute or two, he turned and headed for the door, still empty-handed. The bell jingled again as he stepped back into the night, and I caught a glimpse of him climbing into a dark sedan parked at the far end of the lot. The car's headlights flared to life, and then he was gone, the tail lights disappearing into the rain. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Weird," I muttered, shaking my head. I pulled my laptop back out and tried to refocus, but the unease lingered, like a faint itch I couldn't scratch. The store felt emptier now, the silence heavier. I glanced at the door, half expecting him to walk back in, but the parking lot remained dark and still. I told myself it was nothing, just a guy who changed his mind. I turned up the radio slightly, letting the music drown out my thoughts, and dove back into my paper. The words came easier now, and soon I was lost in my work again, the strange encounter fading to the back of my mind. But somewhere deep down, a small voice whispered that I hadn't seen the last of him. The clock ticked past 3 a.m., and the rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving the parking lot a glistening mirror of street lights. My laptop screen glowed with the half-finished paragraph I'd been wrestling with for the past half hour. The store was quiet again, the earlier unease buried under the monotony of my shift. I yawned, rubbing my eyes, and considered making another cup of coffee. That's when I saw it, a pair of headlights cutting through the darkness outside. I froze my hand, hovering over the laptop. The lights were familiar, too familiar. The same dark sedan from earlier pulled into the lot, parking in the exact same spot at the far end. My heart gave a sharp thud, and I leaned forward, squinting through the glass. The driver's door opened, and out stepped the same man, same green jacket, same deliberate gait. He was back. I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. It wasn't unusual for customers to return, but something about this felt wrong. Why come back after 30 minutes? Why park so far away again? I forced myself to stay calm, sliding my laptop behind the counter as he approached the door. The bell jingled, and he stepped inside his boots, tracking more water onto the floor. This time, he looked directly at me, his eyes dark and unreadable. Up close, I could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the way his lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just stared for a moment before speaking. Restroom. His voice was low, almost a growl, and it sent a shiver down my spine. I blinked, caught off guard. Yeah, it's right over there." I pointed to the back corner of the store, where a single-person restroom was tucked beside the drink coolers. He nodded curtly and walked toward it, his steps slow and measured. The restroom door clicked shut behind him, and I was alone again. I stood there, staring at the closed door, my mind racing. Why drive back just to use the bathroom? There were gas stations, fast food joints, plenty of places closer than this. Unless he hadn't left the area at all. The thought made my stomach twist. Had he been out there, in the rain, watching the store? Watching me? I shook my head, trying to dismiss the idea. I was being paranoid. He'd probably just been driving around, maybe grabbed a coffee somewhere and realized he needed a pit stop. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I glanced at the clock, 3:05 a.m. I'd give him a few minutes, then check if he was still in there. No need to make a big deal out of it. I busied myself with small tasks, wiping down the counter, restacking the gum packets, anything to keep my hands moving. But my eyes kept drifting to the restroom door. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The store was silent, save for the hum of the coolers and the faint drip of water outside. I waited, expecting to hear the door open, the sound of his boots on the floor. Nothing. By the 15-minute mark, my unease had turned to full-blown anxiety. Nobody took that long in a restroom, not in a place like this. I thought about knocking on the door, but the idea made my skin crawl. What if he was doing something in there? What if he was waiting for me to come closer? I pushed the thought away, but it clung to me like damp clothes. I paced behind the counter, my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. I considered calling my manager, but what would I say? Hey, a guy's been in the bathroom too long, and I'm freaking out. I'd sound ridiculous. Still, I grabbed my phone, just in case. The screen lit up, showing no new messages, no missed calls. Just me alone in the middle of the night with a stranger locked in the restroom. At the 20-minute mark, I couldn't take it anymore. I was about to head toward the door, maybe shout something casual, like, "You okay in there?" when headlights swept across the parking lot again. This time, it wasn't a sedan. It was a police cruiser. My heart leapt into my throat as the cruiser pulled up, its lights flashing. But no siren. The officer inside circled the lot slowly, his headlights lingering on the dark sedan parked at the far end. He stopped directly behind it, blocking it in, and stepped out his flashlight, cutting through the drizzle. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a stern expression that made my stomach drop. Something was very, very wrong. The bell jingled as he entered his boots, heavy on the floor. He scanned the store, his eyes sharp and searching, before locking onto me. "Evening," he said, his voice calm, but laced with urgency. "You know who owns that car out there?" I hesitated, my mouth dry. Yeah, there's a guy. He's in the restroom." I pointed toward the back, my hand trembling slightly. "He's been in there for like 25 minutes. The officer's expression darkened. He didn't look curious. He looked worried. "How long, you say?" 25 minutes. Maybe more," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He came in earlier, looked around, left, then came back, just to use the bathroom. I haven't heard anything from him since." The officer nodded his hand, resting on the holster at his hip. "Stay here," he said, and strode toward the restroom. My heart pounded as I watched him approach the door. He knocked sharply, the sound echoing in the empty store. "Police. Open the door." No response. He knocked again, harder, this time, his voice rising. "This is the police. Come out now." Still nothing. I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles white. The officer glanced back at me, his jaw tight. "You got a key to this door?" The officer's question hung in the air, sharp and urgent. I nodded, my hands shaking, as I fumbled through the drawer under the counter. My fingers brushed against pens, paper clips, and loose change, before finally closing around the small, cold key. I hurried over my sneakers, slipping slightly on the wet floor, and handed it to him. "Stay back," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I retreated to the counter, my heart hammering so loudly I could barely hear the rain outside. The officer inserted the key, turned it with a click, and pushed the door open. His gun raised. The fluorescent light from the store spilled into the restroom, illuminating the small tiled space. It was empty. I stared, my breath catching in my throat. The sink gleamed under the light, the mirror reflecting nothing but the open door. The toilet was untouched, the floor dry. There was no sign of the man, no jacket, no boots, no trace that he'd ever been there. I blinked my mind, struggling to process what I was seeing. "That's impossible," I whispered, stepping forward, despite the officer's earlier warning. "He went in there. I saw him. He never came out." The officer didn't respond immediately. He lowered his gun slightly, his eyes scanning the room. "You sure about that?" he asked, his voice steady, but laced with suspicion. "I'm positive," I said, my voice cracking. "I've been here the whole time. There's only one way in and out of that room." He stepped inside, his flashlight sweeping over the walls, the ceiling, the floor. I stayed in the doorway, my hands clenching and unclenching. The restroom was tiny, barely enough space for one person. There was no window, no vent large enough for a person to crawl through. It didn't make sense. The officer crouched, checking under the sink, then stood and tapped the walls, listening for hollow spots. I watched, my mind racing. Had I imagined it? No, I couldn't have. I'd seen him walk in, heard the door click shut. I'd watched the clock tick by, minute after minute, waiting for him to come out. He was real. Anything. I asked, my voice barely audible. The officer shook his head, but his expression was grim. He tilted his head back, his flashlight beam catching something above. "What's that?" he muttered, almost to himself. I followed his gaze. The ceiling was made of those cheap acoustic panels, the kind you could push up and move aside. One of the panels was slightly askew, a faint gap revealing the darkness above. My stomach dropped. "No way," I said, my voice trembling. "He couldn't." Could he? The officer didn't answer. He holstered his gun and grabbed the edge of the sink, hoisting himself up with surprising agility. Standing on the sink, he reached up and pushed the panel aside, shining his flashlight into the crawl space. The beam disappeared into a void of shadows, and for a moment there was only silence. Then I heard it, a faint scuffle, like something heavy shifting in the dark. "Police!" The officer barked, his voice echoing in the small room. "I know you're up there. Come down now. Hands where I can see 'em." No response, but the scuffling grew louder, more frantic. My legs felt weak, and I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. The officer pulled his radio from his belt, his eyes never leaving the ceiling. "Unit 12, I need backup at the 7-Eleven on Maple Street. Suspect possibly in the ceiling. Over." The radio crackled, a voice confirming the request. The officer glanced at me, his expression unreadable. "You stay right there," he said. "Don't move." I nodded, too shaken to speak. My mind was a whirlwind of questions. How had the man gotten up there? Why was he hiding from the police? Or was he planning something else? The thought made my blood run cold. I was alone in the store, just me and my laptop, defenseless. If the officer hadn't shown up, minutes dragged by, each one an eternity. The officer stood on the sink, his flashlight trained on the crawl space, his free hand on his gun. I could hear my own breathing, shallow and ragged, mingling with the distant hum of the coolers. The rain had stopped, leaving the store in an eerie silence. Then the radio crackled again. Unit 12 backups 2 minutes out. ETA 3:45 a.m. The officer acknowledged the message, his eyes still fixed on the ceiling. I wanted to ask what was happening, who the man was, why the police were after him, but my throat was too tight to form words. All I could do was wait, my heart pounding in my chest. The scuffling stopped abruptly, replaced by a heavy thud. The officer tensed his gun, snapping back up. "Don't move!" he shouted. "I'm coming up." Before I could process what was happening, he hoisted himself into the crawl space, disappearing into the darkness. I stood, frozen, my eyes locked on the open panel. The store felt smaller, now the walls closing in around me. I clutched my phone, my thumb hovering over the emergency call button, though I wasn't sure who I'd even call. Seconds later, I heard a shout from above, followed by a crash. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and I stumbled back, my heart in my throat. The officer's voice echoed through the crawl space, sharp and commanding, but I couldn't make out the words. There was another thud, then silence. I backed toward the counter, my eyes darting between the ceiling and the front door. The police backup would be here any second, I told myself. I just had to hold on. But the silence was deafening, and every creak of the building made me jump. Then from the crawl space came a low, guttural sound, like a growl or a laugh. My blood froze. It wasn't the officer. The growl from the crawl space sent a jolt of terror through me, rooting me to the spot. My phone slipped from my trembling hands, clattering onto the counter. The store was a tomb, the fluorescent lights flickering slightly, casting long shadows across the aisles. I wanted to run, to bolt out the front door and into the night, but my legs wouldn't move. The officer was up there somewhere with whatever was making that sound. Before I could decide what to do, headlights flooded the parking lot again. 2 more police cruisers screeched to a stop, their lights painting the store in red and blue. The bell jingled as 3 officers burst in, their guns drawn, their faces grim. "Where's Officer Daniels?" One of them demanded, his eyes scanning the store. I pointed at the ceiling, my voice barely a whisper. He went up there. The guys in the crawl space. The lead officer, a stocky man with a buzz cut, nodded curtly. "Stay back," he ordered, then gestured to his partners. One of them grabbed a step ladder from the back of the store, while the other positioned himself beneath the open panel, his gun trained upward. The lead officer climbed the ladder, his flashlight piercing the darkness above. "Daniels," he shouted. "You up there?" A muffled shout came in response, followed by another crash. The officers moved quickly, the second one climbing up to join the first. I backed away, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The third officer stayed with me, his hand on my shoulder, his eyes never leaving the ceiling. "It's gonna be okay, kid," he said, though his voice was tight with tension. "Just stay calm." I nodded, but calm was the last thing I felt. The noises from the crawl space grew louder. Grunts, thuds, the sound of something heavy being dragged. Then a shout. "We got him!" Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. The officers emerged from the crawl space, dragging a figure between them. It was the man from earlier, his green jacket torn, his face smeared with dust and sweat. His wrists were cuffed, and he was thrashing, his eyes wild, his teeth bared like a cornered animal. Officer Daniels followed his uniform, disheveled, a fresh cut on his cheek. The man was shoved against the wall, his hands secured behind him. He didn't speak, didn't protest, just glared at the officers, then at me. His gaze was like a physical weight, pinning me in place. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. "Who is he?" I managed to ask, my voice shaking. The lead officer glanced at me, his expression grim. "You don't want to know, kid. But you're lucky we got here when we did." They didn't tell me much at first, just hustled the man out to one of the cruisers. Officer Daniels stayed behind, taking my statement. I told him everything. The man's first visit, his strange behavior, his return, the restroom, the ceiling. My words tumbled out in a rush, my hands still trembling. Daniels listened, jotting notes, his face unreadable. When I finished, he sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You did good, kid," he said. "Kept your head on straight. Not everyone would've." "What's the deal with that guy?" I asked, unable to hold back. Why was he up there?" Daniels hesitated, glancing at the other officers. Finally, he leaned in, his voice low. "He's wanted for some bad stuff. Real bad. Happened earlier tonight, a few miles from here. Multiple victims, all alone, all at night. We got a tip about his car, caught his plates on a gas station camera. That's why I was here." My stomach churned. Victims. Like, what did he do? Daniels shook his head. "You don't need the details. Let's just say you're lucky he didn't get to you first." The words hit me like a punch. I thought about the man's eyes, the way he'd looked at me. the way he'd hidden in the ceiling. Had he been waiting for the right moment, planning to catch me off guard? The thought made my skin crawl. Why the ceiling? I asked, my voice barely audible. Daniel shrugged, but his eyes were dark. Could have been hiding from us. Could have been waiting for you to let your guard down. Either way, he's not going anywhere now. The police wrapped up quickly, taking photos of the restroom and the crawl space. They found a small knife tucked in the man's jacket, its blade stained with something dark. I didn't ask what it was. I didn't want to know. By the time they left, the sky was turning gray, the first hints of dawn breaking through the clouds. My shift was over, but I didn't leave right away. I sat behind the counter, staring at my laptop, the cursor blinking on my unfinished paper. The store felt different now. The familiar hum of the coolers no longer comforting. Every creak, every shadow made me jump. I quit the job a week later. I couldn't go back, not after that night. The man was locked up. Daniels assured me facing multiple life sentences. But even now, months later, I can't shake the memory of his eyes, the sound of that growl from the crawl space. I don't work night shifts anymore. I don't think I ever will again. The city never slept, but at 2 a.m., it whispered. Jamal, a 28-year-old security guard, paced the parking lot of a mid-sized office building in the heart of downtown. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked asphalt and exhaust, the distant hum of traffic, a constant reminder of the world beyond. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, bouncing off the rows of parked cars, their windows glinting like eyes watching me. The building loomed behind me, a concrete monolith dotted with unlit windows, its silence oppressive. I adjusted my uniform cap, the embroidered logo of Secure Point Solutions catching the light, and checked my watch. 4 more hours until my shift ended. I'd been working this job for 2 years, guarding this office complex in a neighborhood where crime was as common as the graffiti on the walls. Break-ins were a regular headache for businesses around here, with thieves targeting anything from laptops to confidential files. My role was simple: patrol the lot, check the doors, monitor the security feeds, and keep trouble at bay. Most nights, it was uneventful. Just me, my flashlight, and the occasional stray cat slinking through the shadows. But tonight, something felt off, though I couldn't pinpoint why. This month, I was working solo. My usual partner, Mike, was on leave, and the company was training a new guy to replace him. I didn't mind the solitude. Mike could be a chatterbox, and some of the other guards were downright annoying. Alone, I could focus, let my thoughts wander, maybe even sneak a podcast through my earbuds. when the night dragged on. But being alone also meant no backup, no second pair of eyes. In a place like this that could make all the difference, I circled the lot, my boots crunching on loose gravel. The building was surrounded by a chain-link fence, topped with barbed wire that gleamed faintly under the streetlights. Beyond the fence, across the street, was a vacant lot, overgrown with weeds, its edges swallowed by darkness. I swept my flashlight over the area, a habit born of too many nights spent watching for trouble. That's when I saw them, 2 figures standing at the far end of the lot, just beyond the reach of the streetlights. They were motionless, their silhouettes barely distinguishable against the night. I squinted, trying to make out details, but they were too far away. Were they facing me? The building? I couldn't tell. My pulse quickened, and I gripped the flashlight tighter, the beam trembling slightly. I told myself they were probably just kids, maybe homeless folks, looking for a dry spot to rest. But something about the way they stood, still deliberate, sent a chill down my spine. I kept walking, pretending I hadn't noticed them, but my eyes stayed locked on their shapes. By the time I completed my loop around the lot, they were gone, vanished into the shadows, as if they'd never been there. I stopped scanning the street, the vacant lot, the alleys nearby. Nothing. The night was quiet again, the only sound the faint buzz of the streetlights overhead. I shook my head, muttering to myself, "Get a grip, Jamal." I was tired, that was all. The long hours, the lack of sleep, the constant vigilance, it was messing with my head. I made a mental note of the figures, but didn't dwell on it. The rest of my patrol was uneventful, and by 3 a.m., I was back in the security office, a cramped room tucked at the back of the building. The office was a mess of monitors, coffee stains, and faded motivational posters. I sank into the creaky chair, the glow of the security feeds bathing the room in blue light. Everything looked normal. Empty hallways, locked doors, no alerts. I leaned back, letting the tension ease from my shoulders, and pulled out my phone to scroll through social media. The night was young, and I had a long way to go. The next few nights passed without incident, each one blending into the next in a blur of patrols and paperwork. I'd almost forgotten about the figures in the vacant lot, chalking it up to my imagination, or a trick of the light. But on Friday night, as I made my rounds at 1 a.m., they were back. Same spot, same stillness, same unsettling presence. My flashlight beam caught them briefly before they melted into the darkness as if they knew I'd seen them. This time, I didn't brush it off. My stomach knotted, and I slowed my pace, keeping my eyes on the spot where they'd been. The street was empty now, the vacant lot, a black void. I stood at the edge of the parking lot, the fence cold against my palm, and waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. They didn't return. But the unease stayed with me, a weight pressing against my chest. I decided to change my approach. Instead of continuing my loop, I lingered on the side of the building, facing the street, pacing back and forth to make it clear I was watching. Maybe if they knew I'd noticed them, they'd stay away. My flashlight swept the area, its beam cutting through the fog that had started to roll in. The city felt smaller tonight, the buildings huddling closer, the shadows deeper. I walked the length of the fence, my boots scuffing the asphalt, my ears straining for any sound. A footstep, a whisper, anything. After 15 minutes, I was satisfied they weren't coming back. The tension in my shoulders eased, and I headed inside, the heavy glass doors hissing shut behind me. The lobby was dimly lit, the marble floor reflecting the glow of the emergency lights. I crossed to the hallway leading to the break room, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The break room was a small, windowless space at the far end of the building, furnished with a rickety table, a microwave, and a vending machine that hummed like a dying engine. I dropped into a chair, pulling my lunch from my backpack, a turkey sandwich, and a can of soda. The routine of eating grounded me, and I let myself relax, scrolling through my phone as I chewed. Then I heard it, a faint thud, like something heavy bumping against a wall. I froze my sandwich halfway to my mouth. The break room was silent, the vending machine's hum the only sound. I set my phone down, my eyes fixed on the door to the hallway. The building was old, prone to creaks and groans, but this was different. It was too deliberate, too close. I waited, holding my breath, straining to hear it again. Seconds ticked by. Then a minute. Nothing. I stood my chair, scraping against the floor, and crept to the doorway. The hallway stretched out before me, long and empty, the overhead lights casting harsh shadows. I stood there for a good 30 seconds, listening, but the silence was absolute. I shook my head, forcing a laugh. "You're losing it," I muttered, and returned to my lunch. But the unease lingered, a nagging itch at the back of my mind. I finished eating quickly, my appetite gone, and headed to the security office. The monitors greeted me with their familiar glow, the feeds showing nothing out of the ordinary. No alerts, no flags, no signs of trouble. I ran a quick check of the system, my fingers moving automatically over the keyboard. Everything was fine. So why did I feel like I was being watched? I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. The thud was probably nothing, a pipe settling, a chair shifting. but something in me wouldn't let it go. I decided to do another round, more to ease my mind than because I thought I'd find anything. I grabbed my flashlight and headed out the cold night air, hitting me as I stepped into the lot. The fog had thickened, swallowing the streetlights in a hazy glow. I circled the building, my beam sweeping over the cars, the fence, the shadows. Everything was quiet, too quiet. Back inside, I started my interior patrol, walking the long L-shaped hallway that ran through the building. The main entrance was at one end, its glass doors locked tight. At the other end was a door to a small stairwell, an old relic from the building's early days. It led to an emergency exit, a heavy metal door that was bolted shut with a massive padlock. The exit wasn't connected to the modern security system, a fact that had always bothered me. The company's solution was to make it unusable, but it was still a weak point. I reached the stairwell door and peered through its small window. The padlock was there, glinting in the dim light. I turned to head back, but something made me pause. A feeling, maybe, or a sound I hadn't consciously registered. I pressed my face closer to the glass, my breath fogging the window. And then I saw it. The padlock was broken, snapped clean in half, lying in pieces on the concrete floor. The metal door hung slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness visible through the gap. My heart slammed against my ribs, the flashlight trembling in my hand. The broken padlock stared up at me, its jagged edges catching the light like a warning. I backed away from the stairwell door, my mind racing. Someone had been here. Someone had broken in. The emergency exit was supposed to be impregnable, a dead end. Yet here it was, forced open, the heavy metal door, no match for whatever had pried it apart. I fumbled for my radio, my fingers clumsy with adrenaline. "Base, this is Jamal," I said, my voice shaking. "We've got a breach at the emergency exit." Padlock's broken doors open, requesting immediate backup. The radio crackled, but no response came. I cursed under my breath, realizing the signal was spotty in this part of the building. I needed to get to the security office, call for help, check the feeds. But first, I had to make sure I was alone. The thought that someone, maybe the two figures from the lot, was still inside made my skin crawl. I gripped my flashlight like a weapon, its weight reassuring in my hand. The hallway stretched out before me. The shadows deeper now, the silence heavier. I moved quickly, my boots soft against the carpet, my eyes darting to every corner, every doorway. The building felt alive, its walls watching its floors, creaking under my weight. I reached the security office and locked the door behind me, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The monitors flickered, the feeds showing the same empty hallways, the same locked doors. But I wasn't fooled. I pulled up the footage from the exterior cameras, rewinding to the moment I'd been outside watching the figures. The timestamp showed 12:50 a.m. I watched myself on the screen, pacing near the fence, my flashlight beam sweeping the street. The figures were there just out of focus, their faces obscured by hoods. Then, as I'd stood there, they'd moved, slipping around the side of the building, out of the camera's view. I fast-forwarded, my heart sinking. At 12:55 a.m., while I was still outside, a shadow appeared at the emergency exit. The camera angle was poor, but I could make out two figures, one holding a crowbar, the other keeping watch. They worked quickly, snapping the padlock and forcing the door open. They slipped inside, disappearing into the stairwell. My stomach churned as I realized the truth. They'd been inside the building while I was eating lunch, while I was walking the halls, while I was right there. I checked the interior feeds, my hands shaking. The cameras in the workrooms showed nothing, but the angles were limited blind spots everywhere. I rewound further, catching a glimpse of movement at 1:05 a.m., just after I'd heard the thud in the break room. A figure darted past a camera, too fast to identify, but the glint of metal at their waist made my blood run cold. A knife, maybe, or something worse. I grabbed the phone, dialing 911. This is Jamal Carter, security at 1425 Main Street. I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We've had a break-in. 2 suspects, possibly armed, still inside the building. I need police now. The operator's voice was calm, professional, but it did little to ease my fear. Units are on the way, sir. Stay safe and keep us on the line. I set the phone on speaker, my eyes glued to the monitors. The feeds were still, but I knew better. They were here somewhere, hiding in the shadows, waiting. I thought about the thud in the break room, the moment I'd stood in the hallway, unaware that someone was just feet away, separated by a door. Had they seen me? Had they been watching, planning? I gripped my flashlight, my only weapon, and checked the office door. Locked. The room was small. No windows. No other exits. If they came for me, I'd be trapped. I pushed the thought away, focusing on the monitors. A flicker of movement caught my eye. One of the workroom cameras showed a shadow, brief but unmistakable. They were still here. The operator's voice crackled through the phone. Police are 5 minutes out, Mr. Carter. Can you confirm your location? Security office. First floor. I said, my voice low. I'm locked in, but I think they're close. Stay put, she said. Don't engage. Help is coming. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. My eyes darted between the monitors and the door, my pulse pounding in my ears. The building was a maze of offices, storage rooms, and blind corners. They could be anywhere. I thought about the figures in the lot, their stillness, their purpose. This wasn't a random break-in. They'd planned this, watched me waited for the right moment. A soft creak came from the hallway, and I froze. The monitors showed nothing, but the sound was real close. I held my breath, my hand tightening around the flashlight. Another creak, then silence. I wanted to call out to demand who was there, but my throat was dry, my voice gone. The operator's voice droned on, but I barely heard her. All I could think about was the door, the thin barrier between me and whatever was out there. The creak came again, closer this time, and my heart lurched. I stood, my back pressed against the wall, my flashlight raised like a club. The monitors flickered, the feeds still showing empty hallways, but I didn't trust them. The blind spots were too many, the cameras too old. I glanced at the phone. The operator's voice, a faint buzz in the background. "Police are 2 minutes out," she said. "Stay where you are." I wanted to obey, to wait for help, but the creaks were relentless. Each one a step closer. I imagined the figures from the lot, their faces hidden, their weapons glinting. Had they seen me enter the office? Did they know I was alone? The thought made my skin crawl, but I couldn't just sit here, trapped like a rat. I edged toward the door, my hand hovering over the lock. If I could get to the lobby, I'd have a clear shot to the main entrance where the police would arrive. It was risky, but staying put felt like waiting for a trap to spring. I took a deep breath, turned the lock, and eased the door open, the hinges creaking faintly. The hallway was dark, the emergency lights casting long, jagged shadows. I stepped out my flashlight beam, sweeping the corridor, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they could hear it. The hallway was empty, but the air felt heavy, charged with something I couldn't name. I moved quickly, hugging the wall, my eyes scanning every doorway, every corner. The break room was to my left, its door slightly ajar. I paused, my beam catching the edge of the table where I'd eaten lunch. The memory of the thud came back sharp and vivid. Had they been in there, watching me through the crack in the door? I pushed on, reaching the L-shaped junction where the hallway split. To the right was the main entrance, its glass doors glinting in the distance. To the left was the stairwell, the broken padlock, the open exit. I turned right, my steps quickening, the promise of safety pulling me forward. But then I heard it, a soft scrape, like metal on concrete, coming from the stairwell. I froze, my flashlight beam snapping toward the stairwell door. The window was dark, but I could feel eyes on me, watching from the shadows. My radio crackled, startling me, and I fumbled to silence it. The scrape came again closer, and I backed away, my beam trembling. "Police are here," I whispered to myself, a desperate mantra. "They're almost here." Headlights flooded the lobby, red and blue lights painting the walls. I turned, relief surging through me, as two police cruisers pulled up outside. I ran toward the entrance, my flashlight bouncing my breath ragged. The glass doors slid open, and I stumbled into the night, the cold air hitting me like a slap. 3 officers were already out of their cars, their guns drawn, their faces grim. Jamal Carter. One of them called a tall woman with a no-nonsense voice. "You reported the break-in." "Yes," I gasped, pointing toward the building. "They're inside. 2 of them armed. They broke in through the emergency exit." She nodded, gesturing to her partners. "Stay here," she said, and the officers moved inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. I stood by the cruisers, my hands shaking, my eyes locked on the building. The night was quiet now, the fog settling over the lot like a shroud. Minutes later, the officers emerged, their expressions unreadable. "Building's clear," the lead officer said. "No sign of anyone, but we found evidence of the break-in. Padlocks, toast, doors damaged. You got any footage?" I led them to the security office, my legs still unsteady. I pulled up the feeds, showing them the figures, the break-in, the shadow, in the workroom. The officers watched in silence, their faces grim. "They were prepared," one of them said, a younger guy with a scar on his cheek. "Crowbar, weapons, masks. This wasn't a smash and grab." The lead officer turned to me. "You're lucky, kid. If they'd caught you off guard..." She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. I thought about the thud, the creaks, the moment I'd walked past the break room, unaware of the danger, just feet away. The police took the footage, promising to investigate, but I could tell they weren't optimistic. The cameras were low quality, the suspects' faces obscured. The company later reported that several hard drives and files were missing sensitive data that made them nervous. But no arrests were made, no suspects identified. I kept working the job for a few more weeks, but it wasn't the same. Every shadow, every creak made me jump. I started carrying a pocket knife against company policy, just for peace of mind. Eventually, I quit taking a day job at a warehouse. Safer, quieter, no nights alone in a building that felt alive with secrets. Even now, I think about those figures, their stillness, their purpose. Were they watching me from the start, planning their move? Did they know how close they'd come to catching me, I'll never know. But I still check my locks, twice, still glance over my shoulder when I'm alone. Some nights, when the world is too quiet, I swear I hear that scrape, that creak, waiting in the dark. The hospital's emergency room was a world of its own at 2 a.m. A place where time seemed to slow, caught between the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant wail of sirens. Lynn, a 27-year-old front desk worker, sat behind the check-in counter, my fingers tapping idly on the keyboard. The ER was quiet tonight, a rare reprieve from the usual chaos of broken bones, fevers, and frantic families. The air smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee, the latter courtesy of the pot brewing in the corner. My co-worker Amy sat beside me, her chair creaking as she leaned back, scrolling through her phone. We were the only ones at the desk, the rest of the staff scattered across the department, tending to the few patients we had. I'd been working night shifts at St. Mary's Hospital for 3 years, long enough to know that quiet nights were deceptive. The ER was unpredictable, a place where calm could shatter in an instant. But I liked the job, liked the structure, the sense of purpose, even the odd camaraderie that formed among the night crew. It paid the bills too, which was no small thing in a city where rent seemed to climb every month. Tonight, though, I was grateful for the lull. It gave me a chance to catch my breath, to chat with Amy about nothing in particular. Movies, gossip, the new nurse who'd spilled coffee on his scrubs last week. The waiting area was empty, its rows of plastic chairs gleaming under the harsh lights. Beyond the sliding glass doors, the parking lot stretched out a vast expanse of asphalt dotted with street lights that flickered in the damp night air. It had rained earlier, leaving the ground slick and reflective, and a faint mist hung over the lot, blurring the edges of the world outside. I glanced at the clock. 2:03 a.m. 2 more hours until my shift ended, and I was already dreaming of my bed, of the soft hum of my apartment's heater. Amy yawned, stretching her arms above her head. "I'm gonna hit the cafeteria," she said, standing. "You want anything?" That vending machine's calling my name. I shook my head, smiling. "Nah, I'm good. Don't get lost down there," she laughed, grabbing her badge, and disappeared down the hallway, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. The ER felt emptier without her, the silence settling like a heavy blanket. I turned back to the computer, pulling up the patient log to double-check the night's admissions. It was busy work, something to keep my hands moving, my mind occupied. The screen glowed, the cursor blinking as I scrolled through names and times. Everything was in order as expected. Then the sliding doors hissed open, letting in a gust of cold air. I looked up, startled, my polite smile already forming. A man stepped inside, his presence jarring in the quiet. He was tall, lean, dressed in a black zip-up hoodie and dark jeans that clung to his legs, damp from the mist outside. His hair was long, dark, and unkempt, falling over his eyes in greasy strands. He moved slowly, his steps deliberate, as if measuring the space between the door and the counter. His hands stayed in his pockets, and something about the way he carried himself, tense, coiled, made my stomach twist. "Hi, welcome to St. Mary's," I said, my voice steady, despite the unease creeping up my spine. "How can I help you?" He stopped a few feet from the counter, his head tilting slightly as he looked at me. His eyes were dark, almost black, and they lingered on me longer than felt comfortable. "I'm looking for Hannah Smith," he said, his voice low, flat, like he was reading from a script. The name didn't ring a bell. I frowned, turning to the computer to check the log. Hannah Smith. You said. I typed the name, my fingers moving quickly, the keyboard's clatter, loud in the silence. The search came up empty. No admissions under that name. Not tonight. Not in the past week. I glanced up, meeting his gaze. "I'm sorry. There's no one here by that name. Are you sure she's at this hospital?" "There's another one across town." He cut me off with a nod, abrupt and awkward. "Okay," he said, his voice barely audible. He turned and walked out the doors, sliding shut behind him. The cold air lingered, raising goosebumps on my arms. I sat there, staring at the doors, my heart beating a little faster than it should. I glanced at the security guard, Tom, who stood at the far end of the waiting area, his arms crossed. He'd watched the whole exchange, his brow furrowed. Our eyes met, and we shared a look, one that said, "That was weird." Tom shrugged, but I could tell he felt it too, that strange, unspoken tension the man had left behind. I shook my head, trying to laugh it off. "Creepy," I muttered, turning back to the computer. The patient log stared back at me, but my focus was gone. I kept replaying the encounter. The man's eyes, his voice, the way he'd stood there, like he was sizing me up. I told myself it was nothing. People came to the ER all the time, looking for someone who wasn't there. Wrong hospital, wrong night. It happened, but the unease stayed a faint hum at the back of my mind. I checked the clock again, 2:15 a.m. Amy would be back soon, and the night would drag on, same as always. I took a sip of my coffee, the bitter taste grounding me and tried to focus. The hospital was safe, I told myself. Cameras everywhere, security on site, staff just a call away. Nothing to worry about. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd see that man again. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. The quiet broken only by a couple of minor cases. A kid with a fever, an older man with chest pain. Amy returned from the cafeteria, a bag of chips in hand, and we picked up our conversation where we'd left off. The strange man pushed to the back of my mind. By 4 a.m., my shift was over, and I was ready to collapse. I said goodbye to Amy and Tom, grabbing my bag and heading out to the parking lot. The lot was massive, a sprawling sea of asphalt that dwarfed the hospital itself. Staff were required to park at the far end to leave the closer spaces for patients. And tonight, the walk felt endless. The mist had thickened, cloaking the street lights in a hazy glow, and the air was heavy with the scent of rain. My sneakers crunched on the wet pavement, the sound echoing in the stillness. The hospital loomed behind me, its lights fading as I moved deeper into the lot. I don't know why, but halfway to my car, I thought of the man in the hoodie. His face flashed in my mind, those dark eyes, that flat voice. A shiver ran through me, and I quickened my pace, my keys jingling in my hand. The lot was empty. The other staff cars scattered like islands in the fog. I told myself I was being paranoid. It was just a weird encounter, nothing more. But the silence was oppressive, the mist pressing against me like a living thing. I reached my car, a beat-up sedan that had seen better days, and unlocked the door, tossing my bag onto the passenger seat. I slid inside, the familiar smell of worn upholstery calming my nerves. I locked the doors, a habit born of too many late nights, and started the engine. The hum, a welcome sound. The dashboard clock read 4:12 a.m. I lived 20 minutes away, a straight shot down empty roads. All I had to do was get home, and this night would be over. I pulled out of the lot, the hospital shrinking in my rearview mirror. The roads were deserted, the street lights casting long, lonely beams through the fog. I turned on the radio, letting a soft jazz station fill the car, but it did little to ease the tension in my chest. That man, his voice, his eyes, they clung to me, a shadow I couldn't shake. I glanced in the mirrors, half expecting to see headlights following me, but the road was empty, a black ribbon stretching into the night. The drive was uneventful, but the unease grew with every mile. It was irrational, I knew, but I couldn't help it. I kept checking the mirrors, my eyes darting to the side mirrors, the rear view, the shadows along the road. Nothing. Just me alone with my thoughts. I tried to focus on the music, on the rhythm of the wipers, clearing the mist from the windshield. But my mind kept drifting back to the hospital, to the man who'd asked for someone who didn't exist. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the clock read 4:35 a.m. My house was a small single-story rental tucked at the end of a quiet street. The porch light was on, casting a warm glow over the front door, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Home. Safe. I turned off the engine, grabbed my bag, and stepped out, the cold air biting at my skin. I crossed the lawn, my keys in hand, and climbed the porch steps, the wood creaking under my weight. I unlocked the front door, stepping inside and flipping on the light. The familiar clutter of my living room greeted me, books on the coffee table, a blanket draped over the couch. I hadn't even taken off my shoes when I heard it. Footsteps fast and heavy, sprinting up the porch behind me. My heart stopped. I spun around, my hand still on the doorknob, as the footsteps reached the door. The handle rattled violently, someone trying to force it open. I froze, my breath caught in my throat, my mind screaming. The door held locked tight, but the rattling continued, urgent, desperate. Then a voice, low, familiar, chilling. "Excuse me, ma'am." It said calm, despite the frenzy of the moment. "Can you please open the door? I need help. Please." It was him. The man from the hospital. The hoodie, the voice, the way he said, "Ma'am." It was unmistakable. My legs trembled, my hand gripping the knob so tightly, my knuckles ached. I backed away, my eyes locked on the door, the shadow of his figure visible through the frosted glass. "Open the door." He repeated, his voice, sharper now, insistent. "I need to talk to you." I didn't respond. Couldn't. My phone was in my bag, still on the passenger seat in the car. I cursed myself for not bringing it inside. I stumbled backward, my hip brushing against the couch, and grabbed the landline from the side table. My fingers shook as I dialed 911, my eyes never leaving the door. The rattling stopped abruptly, replaced by a heavy silence. I held my breath, the phone pressed to my ear, waiting for the operator to pick up. Outside, I heard a soft shuffle. Then the sound of footsteps retreating down the porch steps. I crept to the door, peering through the peephole. The porch was empty, the street dark, but I could just make out a figure sprinting down the road, disappearing into the fog. 911. "What's your emergency?" The operator's voice was sharp, pulling me back. "Someone tried to break into my house," I said, my voice trembling. "He followed me from work. He's gone now, but I need help." The operator kept me on the line, her voice a lifeline as I stood in my living room, the phone pressed to my ear. I recounted everything, the man at the hospital, his strange request, the footsteps, the voice at my door. My words tumbled out frantic, but she remained calm, asking for my address, assuring me that police were on the way. I locked every window, checked every door, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the bolts. The house felt smaller now, the walls closing in the shadows deeper. I sat on the couch clutching the phone, my eyes darting to the windows, the door, the hallway. Every creak, every gust of wind made me jump. The man was gone, I told myself. He'd run off, scared away, by the locked door, by my silence. But the fear lingered, a cold weight in my chest. How had he followed me? How had he known where I lived? The hospital was 20 minutes away, a straight drive with no detours. Had he been behind me the whole time, hidden in the fog? The operator's voice cut through my thoughts. Officers are pulling into your street now, Lynn. Stay where you are. They'll knock and identify themselves. I nodded, though she couldn't see me, and stood moving to the window. Headlights pierced the fog. 2 police cruisers parking in my driveway. Relief flooded through me, but it was tinged with dread. I opened the door as the officers approached their flashlights, sweeping the yard. The lead officer, a broad-shouldered woman with a stern face, introduced herself as Sergeant Reyes. "You're Lynn?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. "Yes," I said, stepping aside to let them in. He was here at the door. He tried to get in, then ran off. Reyes nodded her partner, a younger man, with a notepad jotting down notes. I told them everything, the words spilling out as I led them through the house. They checked the porch, the yard, the street, their flashlights cutting through the fog. Reyes's radio crackled. Another officer reporting no sign of the suspect in the area. My heart sank. He was gone, slipped away into the night. Reyes turned to me, her expression unreadable. "We need to check your car," she said. "You said he followed you from the hospital. We need to know how." I nodded, grabbing my keys and leading them to the driveway. My car sat where I'd left it, the driver's door still unlocked in my haste to get inside. Reyes's partner opened the driver's side, his flashlight sweeping the interior. I stood back, my arms crossed, the cold seeping through my jacket. Then he froze, his beam catching on something in the back seat. "Sergeant," he called, his voice tight. "You need to see this." Reyes joined him, and I stepped closer, my heart pounding. The back door of my car was slightly ajar, the gap barely noticeable in the dark. Reyes pulled it open, her flashlight revealing the back seat. My breath caught in my throat. The seat was empty, but the floor mat was crumpled, as if someone had been crouched there hidden. A faint smell lingered. Sweat maybe, or something sharper, metallic. He was in your car, Reyes said, her voice low. The whole drive home, the words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered back, my hand covering my mouth. He'd been there in my car, inches from me, silent as I drove through the fog. The unease I'd felt, the constant checking of my mirrors. It hadn't been paranoia. He'd been there, waiting, watching. Reyes's partner found a small scrap of fabric caught on the seatbelt, a piece of black hoodie torn in his haste to escape. They bagged it as evidence, their faces grim. You're lucky you parked in the driveway, Reyes said. If you'd gone into a garage, he'd have had access to your house. No one to hear you, no one to help. The thought made my stomach churn. I imagined him slipping out of the car, following me inside the locked door, no longer a barrier. I wrapped my arms around myself, the cold sinking deeper into my bones. The officers took my statement, their questions thorough, but gentle. They promised to review the hospital's CCTV footage to track down the man, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. He was a ghost, a shadow in the fog. They stayed until dawn, their presence a small comfort. As the sky lightened, Reyes gave me her card, urging me to call if I saw anything suspicious. I nodded, too shaken to speak, and watched them drive away. The house was quiet now, the fog lifting, but the fear remained a constant companion. The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and endless questions. The police reviewed the hospital's footage, piecing together the man's movements. He'd been caught on camera, lingering outside the ER for weeks, watching from the shadows, his face obscured by the hoodie. He'd studied my routines, learned my car, waited for a night when I'd left it unlocked, a mistake I'd never make again. They identified him through the footage, a drifter with no prior record, no clear motive. His name was irrelevant, a detail that meant nothing in the face of what he'd done. He was arrested 3 days later, found hiding in a motel on the edge of town. The piece of hoodie fabric matched, and the knife in his possession, a small, wicked blade, tested positive for traces of blood, though not mine. He never confessed, never explained why he'd targeted me. He only said, over and over, that he just wanted to talk. The words chilled me, their simplicity hiding something darker, something I didn't want to understand. The police speculated he'd been fixated on me for weeks, maybe longer. He'd learned my schedule, my habits, the layout of the hospital lot. The name Hannah Smith was a lie, a pretext to get close to test my reaction. They found notes in his motel room, rambling, incoherent scribbles about her, though it was unclear if her was me or someone else. The uncertainty was worse than any answer. I took a leave of absence from the hospital, unable to face the ER, the lot, the memories. My co-workers called checking in. but I could hear the unease in their voices, the unspoken question. Could it have been me? I moved out of my house a month later, unable to sleep in a place where his footsteps had echoed. My new apartment was smaller, safer, with bars on the windows and a deadbolt that took 3 turns to lock. The man was charged with stalking, attempted breaking and entering, and possession of a weapon, but the trial was months away. I didn't care about the outcome. Not really. He was locked up, and that was enough. But the fear he'd planted in me grew a seed that took root in every quiet moment, every empty street. I stopped working nights, taking a day job at a clinic across town. The pay was less, but the daylight was worth it. Even now, I check my mirrors, lock my doors, scan the shadows. I see his face in crowds, hear his voice in the wind. The police say he's gone, that I'm safe, but I don't believe them. Not fully. Some nights when the world is too quiet, I lie awake, listening for footsteps, for that voice at my door. And I wonder if he's still out there, waiting, watching, ready to finish what he started. Rain drummed against the windows of my parents' split-level house, a steady rhythm that filled the quiet morning. Emma, a 20-year-old college student, sprawled on the living room couch, the remnants of a late-night movie marathon scattered around me. Popcorn bowls, soda cans, a half-eaten bag of chips. My parents were out of town, attending a friend's wedding in another state, leaving me alone for the weekend. I hadn't minded. The idea of having the house to myself was thrilling, a rare chance to blast music, binge movies, and sleep in without judgment. But now, as I blinked awake, the house felt too big, too silent, the rain casting a gray pallor over everything. It was Saturday, and the clock on the wall read 9:27 a.m. Though the sky outside was so dark, it could have been dusk. The living room was cozy with its plush couch and oversized TV, but the sliding glass door to the back deck let in a chill that made me pull the blanket tighter around my shoulders. The blinds covered most of the door, but a 5-foot gap revealed the deck slick with rain, and the backyard beyond shrouded in mist. I yawned, stretching, and reached for the remote, intending to find something mindless to watch until I felt human again. The house was at the end of a dead-end road in a small, quiet neighborhood where everyone knew each other. Visitors were rare, and unexpected knocks even rarer. My parents had lived here for years, and I'd grown up knowing the creaks of the floorboards, the hum of the heater, the way the wind rattled the windows on stormy days. It was home safe and familiar, but today something felt off. Maybe it was the rain, or the fact that I was alone, but the silence was heavier than usual, pressing against me like a weight. I flicked on the TV, the bright colors of a morning talk show chasing away some of the gloom. I stood intending to make coffee when I heard it, two soft knocks at the front door. My heart gave a sharp thud, and I froze the remote still in my hand. The knocks weren't loud, almost tentative, but they cut through the quiet like a blade. I glanced at the door hidden around the corner from the living room and waited, expecting another knock. A voice, something. Nothing came. I set the remote down, my pulse quickening. It was probably nothing, a neighbor checking in, a delivery driver dropping off a package. But the timing felt wrong. The rain too heavy for casual visits. I crept toward the hallway, my bare feet cold against the hardwood, and peeked around the corner. The front door was solid oak, its small window curtained, offering no view of the porch. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the deadbolt, then stepped back. If it was important, they'd knock again. I returned to the couch, my eyes darting to the TV, the cheerful host's voice suddenly grating. I muted it, straining to hear any sound from outside. The rain continued a soft patter, but the house was silent. I told myself I was being silly. I was a shy person, always had been, and being alone made me jumpy. But the knocks lingered in my mind, a puzzle I couldn't solve. Then I remembered the Amazon package. I'd ordered a new phone charger due today. Relief washed over me, and I grabbed my phone, opening the app to check the delivery status. My heart sank. The package wasn't due until 5 p.m., hours away. The knocks hadn't been a delivery. I set the phone down, my hands trembling slightly, and stared at the front door, half expecting it to rattle again. I stood moving to the window beside the couch and parted the curtains, peering out at the front yard. The rain blurred the view, but the porch was empty, the street deserted. No cars, no people, just the steady fall of water. I let the curtains fall, my breath fogging the glass, and tried to shake the unease. Whoever it was, they were gone. Maybe kids playing a prank, or someone at the wrong house. It happened right, but then I heard it. A soft creak, like footsteps on wood, coming from the back deck. My heart leapt into my throat, and I spun toward the sliding glass door. The blinds blocked most of the view, but through the gap, I could see the deck, its planks dark with rain. The creak came again, deliberate, and I backed away, my hands clenching the blanket. Someone was out there, moving their steps, muffled by the storm. I froze my eyes, locked on the gap in the blinds, waiting for a shadow, a shape, anything. The rain pounded harder, drowning out smaller sounds, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. I edged toward the door, my hand reaching for the lock, double-checking it was secure. It was the bolt firmly in place, but my fingers lingered trembling. The deck was silent now, the creaks gone, but the fear remained a cold knot in my stomach. I grabbed my phone, my thumb hovering over the emergency call button. I didn't want to overreact, didn't want to be the girl who called the cops over nothing. But the knocks, the creaks, they weren't nothing. I moved to the couch, sinking into it, my eyes darting between the front door and the glass door. The TV flickered its silent images, casting strange shadows on the walls. I felt small, exposed, the house, no longer a haven, but a trap. The rain didn't let up, its relentless patter, filling the house with a restless energy. I sat on the couch, my phone clutched in my hands. The screen's glow, a small comfort in the dim living room. It was 9:45 a.m., but the storm made it feel like night, the gray light seeping through the blinds, casting long, jagged shadows. The knocks at the front door and the creaks on the deck had stopped, but the silence was worse heavy with the promise of something waiting, watching. I tried to distract myself, scrolling through my phone, but my eyes kept drifting to the sliding glass door. The gap in the blinds was a window to the unknown, a vulnerability I couldn't ignore. I stood moving to close it, my steps slow, deliberate. As I reached for the blinds, a figure appeared in the gap, a man bald, dressed in a black jacket and pants, his face expressionless as he stared directly at me. I gasped, stumbling back, my phone slipping from my hand and landing on the floor. The man didn't move, his eyes locked on mine, unblinking, like a predator sizing up its prey. My heart pounded, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. He reached for the door, his hand testing the handle, the glass rattling faintly. It held locked tight, but the sound was deafening, a violation of the safety I'd taken for granted. I backed away, my eyes never leaving him, my mind racing. Who was he? Why was he here? The house was isolated, the neighborhood quiet. Nobody came here without a reason. I thought of the knocks, the creaks, and realized he'd been circling, testing, looking for a way in. The front door hadn't worked, so he'd tried the deck, and now he was here, inches away, separated only by a pane of glass. He pushed harder, the door shaking, and I turned, running for the hallway. My bare feet slapped against the hardwood, the sound echoing in the empty house. I reached the bathroom, a small room just off the hall, and slammed the door shut, locking it with trembling hands. The lock was flimsy, a cheap mechanism that wouldn't hold for long, but it was all I had. I leaned against the door, my breath ragged, my heart pounding so loud I could barely think. The house was silent, the rain a distant roar. I waited, straining to hear any sound. Footsteps, a voice, anything. Then it came a loud bang, sharp and jarring from the direction of the living room. The glass door. He was trying to break it. I slid to the floor, my back against the door, my hands covering my ears. Another bang, louder, and I pictured the glass shattering his boots, crunching over the shards as he stepped inside. I needed my phone. I cursed myself for dropping it, for not grabbing it as I ran. It was out there on the living room floor, my only way to call for help. I thought about running back a mad dash to retrieve it, but the thought of facing him, of seeing those empty eyes again, paralyzed me. Another bang, and I whimpered the sound escaping before I could stop it. The glass hadn't broken yet, but it would. He was determined, relentless. I scanned the bathroom, desperate for something to use, a weapon, a tool, anything. The room was small, with a sink, a toilet, a shower, and a tiny closet stuffed with towels. My eyes landed on a plunger in the corner, its wooden handle sturdy, but useless against a man his size. I grabbed it anyway, clutching it like a lifeline, my hands shaking. The bangs continued rhythmic, each one a hammer against my nerves. I pressed my ear to the door, listening for movement. The bangs stopped abruptly, replaced by a heavy silence. Had he given up? Was he gone? I didn't dare hope. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, crossing the deck. They paused, then moved again, circling the house. He was looking for another way, in another weakness to exploit. I stood my legs unsteady and opened the bathroom door a crack, peering into the hallway. The living room was out of sight, but the TV's flicker cast faint light on the walls. I needed my phone, needed to call the police before he found a way inside. I took a deep breath, gripping the plunger, and stepped into the hall, my eyes darting to the glass door. The gap in the blinds was empty, the deck dark, but I knew he was still out there, somewhere. I crept toward the living room, my heart in my throat, every step a battle against fear. The couch came into view. The blanket crumpled where I'd left it. My phone lay on the floor, its screen dark, just out of reach. I glanced at the glass door, the blinds swaying slightly in the draft. Another bang came, sudden and sharp, and I flinched, dropping to my knees. The glass hadn't broken, but it was close, the frame rattling with the force. I crawled forward, my hands shaking as I grabbed the phone. Another bang, and I scrambled back, retreating to the hallway, my breath hitching. I glanced at the screen, still functional. Thank God, and dialed 911, my fingers fumbling. The call connected, and I pressed the phone to my ear. My eyes locked on the living room. 911. What's your emergency? The operator's voice was calm, a beacon in the storm. Someone's trying to break into my house. I whispered, my voice shaking. He's at the back door, banging on the glass. I'm alone. Please send help. The operator's voice was steady, guiding me through the panic. As I crouched in the hallway, the phone pressed to my ear. Stay calm, ma'am, she said. Police are on their way. Can you tell me where you are in the house? The bathroom. I lied, glancing at the open door behind me. I'd meant to retreat there, but the living room was closer. The couch, a flimsy barrier between me and the glass door. Another bang came louder, and I flinched, my free hand gripping the plunger. The glass was holding, but each strike weakened it, the frame groaning under the pressure. Stay where you are, the operator said. Lock the door if you can. Help is coming. I nodded, though she couldn't see me, and crawled back toward the bathroom, my phone clutched tightly. The hallway felt endless, the shadows deeper. Now, the TV's light casting eerie shapes on the walls. I reached the bathroom, slipping inside and locking the door. The click of the bolt, a small reassurance. I sank to the floor, my back against the door, the plunger across my lap. Tell me what's happening, the operator said, her voice a lifeline. He's trying to break the glass door, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He was at the front door, earlier, then the deck. He's not stopping? Another bang, and I heard it, the unmistakable crack of glass splintering. My heart stopped, my breath catching in my throat. The operator's voice faded, drowned out by the sound of shards hitting the deck. The rain louder now, unfiltered by the barrier. He was inside. Footsteps crunched over the glass, slow, deliberate moving into the living room. He's in the house, I whispered, my voice breaking. He broke the glass. He's coming. Stay calm, the operator said, her voice sharper now. Police are 3 minutes out. Find a safe place. Hide if you can. I looked around the bathroom, my eyes wild. The closet was my only option, a narrow space barely big enough for me. I stood, my legs trembling, and opened the closet door, shoving towels aside. The footsteps were closer now, crossing the living room, heavy and purposeful. I climbed into the closet, pulling the door shut, the darkness swallowing me. The space was cramped, the smell of detergent overwhelming. But I curled up, clutching the phone, the plunger useless now. The footsteps stopped, and I held my breath, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. The operator's voice was faint, urging me to stay quiet, to stay hidden. Then I heard it. The bathroom door rattling the handle, twisting. The lock held, but it wouldn't for long. A loud bang followed the door, shaking in its frame, and I whimpered, biting my lip to stay silent. "He's at the door," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "He's trying to get in." "Stay with me," the operator said. "Police are almost there. You're doing great." Another bang harder, and the door splintered, the wood cracking under the force. I pictured him on the other side, his bald head, his empty eyes, something heavy in his hands, a bat, a crowbar, something stolen from the house. The bangs continued, relentless, each one a step closer to breaking through. My phone beeped, the battery warning flashing, and panic surged through me. Not now, not now. The banging stopped, replaced by a heavy silence. I strained to hear my breath, shallow, my body trembling. Footsteps moved away, slow, deliberate, descending the stairs to the lower level. He was searching, looking for me, for another way in. I waited, counting the seconds, praying he wouldn't return. Then the banging resumed, louder, harder, the door shuddering with each strike. My phone died, the screen going black. The operator's voice cut off mid-sentence. I stared at it, my heart sinking. The darkness of the closet, absolute. I was alone, truly alone, with no way to know if help was coming. The banging grew frantic, the door splintering further, and I grabbed the towels, piling them over myself, a futile attempt at protection. Then a new sound, loud, authoritative knocks at the front door. "Police," a voice shouted, sharp and commanding. My heart leapt, relief flooding through me. The banging stopped, and I heard footsteps fast and heavy, moving toward the back of the house. He was running, escaping the way he'd come in. I stayed hidden, my breath ragged, the towels damp with my sweat. The front door creaked open, followed by shouts. Police officers, their voices overlapping their boots heavy on the floor. Clear one called, then another. I waited too scared to move until I heard a voice closer, calm but firm. "Ma'am, it's the police. You're safe now. Come out." I pushed the closet door open, the light blinding, and stumbled out, the towels falling around me. An officer stood in the bathroom doorway. His flashlight lowered his face, kind but serious. "You okay?" he asked, helping me to my feet. I nodded, though I wasn't okay. Not really. The house was a crime scene now. The living room, a mess of shattered glass and overturned furniture. The police had caught the man as he tried to flee, tackling him in the backyard. He was cuffed face down in the grass, his black jacket torn, his eyes still empty as they hauled him away. The police stayed for hours, their radios crackling, their flashlights sweeping the house. They took my statement, their questions, gentle but thorough. As I sat on the couch, a blanket around my shoulders, the plunger abandoned on the floor. The glass door was a jagged hole, the rain seeping in the deck, a crime scene taped off with yellow caution tape. The man was gone, locked in the back of a cruiser, but his presence lingered a stain on the house on me. They told me he was a stranger, a drifter, with a history of break-ins, but no clear motive for targeting me. The knocks, the creaks, the relentless assault on the door, they were opportunistic. They said a predator testing a vulnerable target. But I didn't believe it, not fully. The way he'd looked at me, the way he'd moved, felt personal, deliberate. They found a knife in his jacket, its blade clean but sharp, and a set of tools in his pockets, lock picks, a crowbar, a flashlight. He'd been prepared, ready for more than a simple theft. The police speculated he'd seen the house from the road, noticed the lack of cars, the quiet neighborhood. My parents' absence, my solitude had made me an easy mark. They found footprints in the mud around the house, evidence he'd circled it for days, watching, waiting. The thought made my skin crawl, the idea that he'd been out there, hidden in the shadows, while I'd slept, eaten, lived my life unaware. My parents rushed home, cutting their trip short, their faces pale as they hugged me, their voices thick with guilt. I stayed with them for weeks, unable to be alone, unable to sleep without checking the locks, the windows, the shadows. The house was repaired, the glass door replaced, but it wasn't home anymore. Every creak, every gust of wind brought me back to that morning, to the man's eyes, the sound of glass breaking. The man was charged with attempted burglary assault and possession of a weapon, his trial set for months away. I didn't care about the details, didn't want to see him again, even in a courtroom. He was locked up, and that was enough. But the fear he'd left behind was a living thing, a shadow that followed me everywhere. I moved back to my college dorm, the noise of roommates, a comfort, the campus security, a reassurance. I stopped ordering packages, stopped answering the door, stopped trusting the quiet. Even now, months later, I hear those knocks, those creaks in my dreams. I see his face blank and unfeeling, staring through the glass. The police say I'm safe, that he's gone, but I don't believe them, not fully. Some nights, when the rain falls and the world is too quiet, I lie awake, listening for footsteps, for the sound of glass breaking. And I wonder if he'll come back, if he's still out there waiting for another chance.